So when I had the thought, I want to start a podcast, and then immediately had the thought after that, but it's hard. Okay. I let that ruminate for probably almost a year and a half. I let it ruminate for a long time. Hello, and welcome to the Chaos to Clarity podcast. My name is Maggie, aka your business bestie. I teach female coaches, speakers, and course creators to release procrastination and perfection so that they can get more done, book more clients, and have the time freedom that all entrepreneurs crave. This is not your typical business coaching podcast. We're talking about business, life, probably some wooey magic, and probably some singing or referencing song lyrics along the way. So if you're into business building, making more money, and getting a little bit of a mindset shift along with having a good laugh, you're definitely in the right place. I've grown 3 businesses from $0 to consistent 4 and 5 figure months over the last 15 plus years. And now I'm helping you do the same thing. It didn't happen overnight, and it certainly didn't happen without the help of others. They say it takes a village to raise children, and I believe it takes a village to grow a business as well. So in this podcast, you'll find people who help you grow your village, cheer you on, as well as holding you accountable. I'm so excited you're here, and I can't wait for you to listen to each episode. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Chaos to Clarity podcast. My name is Maggie. I am your business bestie and your Chaos to Clarity coach. I'm so excited to have you here today, and I am so excited to talk about limiting beliefs and mindset and how a kids show, Sesame Street, taught me how to shift my thoughts, right? Or helped me in navigating shifting of my thoughts. So number one, I want to talk about what is a limiting belief. So a limiting belief is something that usually is a thought after a thought, right? So let's take this podcast, for instance, right? I had the thought of, I want to have a podcast. And about 2 years ago, I also had a thought come up right after that, saying, but podcasting is hard. Okay. And that was definitely a borrowed thought that I had received from someone else. Okay. So I know other podcasters, right? I know other people who have podcasting or who are podcasters, right? And so on and so forth. A lot of people have told me podcasting is hard. So naturally, I believed that, right? Like it was a borrowed thought because people I knew in my sphere of influence told me that they thought it was hard. And that's okay, right? Those thoughts, it's okay to borrow those thoughts. It's also okay to set those thoughts down if they aren't true for you, right? So when you think about something being hard, or maybe something in your business is hard right now, right? Maybe it's hard to talk about your offers. Maybe it's hard to figure out your offers. Maybe it's hard to create that Facebook group you've been dreaming of. Whatever it is, right? See the thought or write the thought down. That always helps me, is writing the thought down. So when I had the thought, I want to start a podcast, and then immediately had the thought after that, but it's hard. Okay. I let that ruminate for probably almost a year and a half. I let it ruminate for a long time. If there are a few things that are true about me, and I like to ruminate on things. I also like to read and understand like what it takes to have a podcast. So, or to have something, right? When I'm stepping into something new. I also like to fly by the seat of my pants a little bit and just jump in, right? So I have that like fierce curiosity and just the courage to jump all in. Now, when I originally had the thought, I want to start a podcast, podcasting is hard, okay? I moved out of that thought when I started talking to a few other people who said, actually, podcasting isn't that hard. There are a lot of platforms that will help you podcast, right? That will make it easier to have a podcast. Now, I'm just taking podcasting as an example because it's something I've been recently doing that I recently thought was hard. I have now shifted that mindset, okay? So, I discovered Anchor.fm, which is now Spotify for podcasters. That website, it's free to have a podcast. It makes it very easy and accessible to have a podcast, to understand how to start podcasting, okay? So that was a great place to start. Now, I want to go back to what I said at the beginning, how a kids show, how Sesame Street literally helped me to shift my thoughts. Okay, so I have little kids. My oldest is 5. My youngest is 1.5. We love Elmo here. And knowing that we watch Sesame Street, and there's a portion on Sesame Street on the PBS Kids app where they talk about building with blocks, and they run out of blocks and they need more blocks. They want the tower to be higher. So there's a song that goes along with it, and it's called I Wonder What If, Let's Try, right? It talks about, so you're having a problem and you've got to figure it out, okay? And I get goosebumps thinking about this because I love it so much, and it's such a good way as a mom to know that there are places that I can help my kids understand that they can work through their limiting beliefs, but also that I can work through some of my own. Okay. So I had the thought, I want to start a podcast, right? I wonder if I could start a podcast, right? And then the what if, okay, here's where you have to do a little bit of work. In the what if, when I was going to start my podcast, I wrote down a couple of names that I wanted for the podcast. And I've always been I've always had chaos to clarity, in the back of my mind as I enjoy navigating through chaos, right? There is a part of me that, yes, I do like the chaos. I feel like, I'm not going to lie, it's the manifesting generator in me where I like to have a lot of things happening all at once. I like to have a lot of plates spinning, so to speak. However, I also like to know what I'm doing, right? I kind of like to have a plan. So when I was thinking about the podcast, wondering if it was for me, I did stop to think about what could this be? What could this podcast be? What could this coaching business be? What could this photography business be, right? You can fill in that what if with whatever you want to be there. So as I was daydreaming about this podcast, thinking, what could this be? What do I want this to look like? What does success mean? What does failure mean? And how am I going to navigate through the ups and downs of podcasting? Okay, so right off the bat, number one, I needed to know how to edit a podcast. Was I going to ship that out and hire someone to edit my podcast for me, or was I going to do it myself? Okay, so because for me, I am a big advocate for learning how to do it myself first so that I understand it. Okay. I enjoy editing. As most of you who listen probably know, I am a photographer. So I know how to edit photos. I know how to edit video. I know that editing video, not my favorite task. Okay. So when I think about podcasting, or those initial thoughts of what does this podcast look like? How am I going to navigate it? Editing the audio was one thing that I knew I needed to try to do. And I also knew that I was okay hiring someone if I needed it to do this for me. Now, I have a Mac. Learning GarageBand was very easy. GarageBand is a free app that is on my MacBook. So it was not an issue for me. Okay. It took me a few minutes to figure out, a couple Google searches to figure out, right, how to record in GarageBand and how to export in GarageBand. And then where on my computer did those files save to, right? Okay. So fairly easy when it comes to that. So For you, that might be different, and that's okay. I really want to stress that, right? Like, just because it's one way for me doesn't mean it has to be that way for you. And that is also something that in my coaching, right, in the coaching realm that I have, people who come to me and they want my coaching, I ask them a lot of questions because chances are you know the answers or you can work through the answers all on your own, which is, I think, such an amazing piece of coaching, is that with some really good questions, you are able to see the answers like appear right in front of you. So again, as I was going through like the what if of the podcast, right? It came up, what if this fails? What if this succeeds? So what does failure, what does success look like for you for this thing? Okay, remember the 3 questions are I wonder, what if, let's try. Those are the 3 questions that they ask in that segment on Sesame Street for you to think about, right? And on Sesame Street, they're talking about building a castle, right? With more blocks. What could you use? So for me, for the podcast, what does failure look like? What does success look like? What am I going to do to navigate the ups and downs of podcasting, right? It's one more thing that I am adding to my repertoire of ways to reach people, okay? Number one, I wasn't really satisfied with the way I was reaching people on Facebook in groups, and I wanted something to essentially spice it up. So, a podcast. I love talking to people. I love talking, right? I love doing this and giving people information and value. So, that was part of my like, what if I did this? What does it look like? How often will I record episodes? How often will I interview people? Are people even going to sign up to be interviewed by me? So I knew that I had the opportunity to shift as I needed to, right? To make those ebbs and flows and just understand how I wanted this podcast to go. Now, the last portion of this is let's try. This last portion, the let's try, is probably the hardest because it's the most vulnerable, right? It's the place where you have to put yourself out there. You have to move through the chaos in order to get to the clarity. And that piece of business building is so often the hardest part because that's where all of those questions that you ask in the what if, right? What if it fails? What if it succeeds? What if nobody signs up? What if I don't like doing it? Right? All of those questions start bubbling up in the let's try phase. 100%, they have all bubbled up for me, right? Taking into account the podcast, right? If we're focusing on that, all of those questions have bubbled up. I've also thought like, wow, I am so lucky that all of these people are signing up, right? To be interviewed on here. I've also had that thought. So being curious and staying curious is such an important part of working through your limiting beliefs. And like I've said before, limiting beliefs are all over the place. Everything from like, my husband loves to ski. I kind of like to ski, but I'm not super sure-footed. I haven't done it a lot, so I'm not like overly confident about being able to ski, right? Same thing when I had a scooter. I wasn't overly confident about being able to drive the scooter, right? There are so many things that we have limiting beliefs about. And a lot of time it's our brain trying to keep us safe, trying to keep us from doing things that are, so way back in the caveman days, right? When we needed to stay safe from saber-toothed tigers, these like limiting beliefs of like, I shouldn't go out there because I'm going to get eaten, like, or killed or whatever, right? So things like that, when you are, working through some of that stuff, it's so important to understand the let's try phase is probably going to be the hardest phase. And I am in that let's try phase, right? For my podcast, I recently, like within the last couple of weeks, have put my podcast on more platforms now. So now you can find my podcast on Pandora. It's now on Stitcher. It's on Amazon Music. It's on Spotify. It's on Apple. It's on Castbox. And as I added more platforms to this, I went through and I was looking at, okay, where my podcast is now, how many listens is it getting in all these places, right? Where are people listening to it the most? And I don't necessarily, I'm not super tied to the amount of listeners. So that is one piece of the let's try and the what if, right? So in the what if, one of my questions in there was, what if nobody listens to it, right? What if nobody listens to this? What does success look like? What does failure look like? What are the ways that I am going to say, yes, I'm going to keep doing this, or no, I'm not going to do this. And for myself, really one of the best things that I did to kind of just remove and just be detached from the outcome was, if one person listens to my podcast, any episode, I am ecstatic. I'm also not really tied to the performance of it. Obviously, I would love people to listen to it. And if you're listening to this right now, I just want to say thank you so much, right? I am so thankful for everyone who tunes in, for everyone that listens, no matter where they are listening. I am so thankful for you, right? But I'm not tied to people like being here. And I think in today's society, where we are a society of, I need to have this now, I need instant feedback, right? Podcasting is not always instant feedback. As I'm recording this now on my other screen, I have the podcast performance pulled up on my other screen, and it's up and down, up and down, up and down. When I have a podcast episode that comes out, there's more listens on those days. When I don't, there's like 0 to 3 people listening at any given time. So detaching myself from that outcome, right? Like I'm looking at this and I'm going, wow, people are listening. That is amazing. That is so good. On the flip side, I could be saying, oh my God, only 1 person listened yesterday, or only 2 people listened. And that's only the data that Anchor gives me, right? I can go to different platforms and get different data from those platforms. So I want to wrap this up a little bit. So limiting beliefs, your mindset around them, and working through them, right? Okay, so limiting beliefs. Any thought that you have followed by, I don't think I can do that, right? Or that thought that's going to hold you back from stepping forward. 2 years ago, when I had that thought of, I want to have a podcast, what if I would have done that then? Where would I be today? But I also don't hold myself to that, right? Like I don't beat myself up over, why didn't I do this sooner? I don't, because maybe it wouldn't have worked out then, right? I truly believe that when you step into that mindset, that place of, I'm going to do this now, that is when you are ready. So maybe 2 years ago, I wasn't ready. Maybe I wasn't, and that's okay, right? I'm ready now, and I'm stepping forward and moving into this now. So when you're working through those limiting beliefs, asking yourself, I wonder, what if, let's try. Those 3 questions are going to help you so much as you're working through some of those beliefs, right? If you want to start a business, I wonder what would happen if I started a business. What if people want my help? What would I talk about? Who am I going to serve, right? All of those details that you need to have in order to run a business. Now, if you need help with this, that is where I come in, okay? Chaos to Clarity Coaching is navigating all of those thoughts and helping you figure them out in an appropriate manner, right? Because if you think about starting a business, there are so many questions, so many. They're all good. They're all valid, right? There's all valid reasons to yes, do it, or no, do not do it, right? And they are different for everyone, okay? So Chaos to Clarity Coaching with me helps you navigate those thoughts in a way that works exactly for you. So right now, if you are listening to this, I do have one-on-one spots open and available for you to opt into. I'm going to drop a link below. So if you have any questions, book a discovery call with me, and we're going to walk through what it is you want to do, who you want to serve, and how you think you want to do it, right? We're going to kind of go through the I wonder, what if, let's try. And we're going to navigate through some of that and see where you are with your beliefs around your business. We're also going to see what your limiting beliefs are. Because I think it's important to see both, right? You can always have a positive outlook, but there's going to be negatives, right? There's going to be things that are going to go wrong. There's going to be things that aren't going to go the way you expect. And I think it's foolish to think that everything is constantly rainbows and butterflies, because it's not. Business, like having a business, is fairly straightforward and simple. The hard work around it is the thoughts that come with it, all of the garbage thoughts that people gift you. And, for what it's worth, right? Like, you have to understand your mindset around it, and you have to decide what you are going to take in and keep, and what you're going to take in and let it right back out, right? Because people are always going to be giving you advice. So that is where I'm going to wrap it up for today, because I think I could go on and on about this. And if you are interested in a one-on-one coaching situation with me, I have a number of spots available right now. So go ahead and book a discovery call. I can't wait to connect with you, and I will talk to you again so soon.